What if the person who disrespected you just handed you the most powerful tool for your own transformation, and you almost missed it because you were too busy being offended? There is something nobody tells you about disrespect. Not the self-help books. Not the motivational speeches. Not the well-meaning advice of people who tell you to brush it off, rise above it, be the bigger person, as if rising above something is as simple as deciding to. Nobody tells you that disrespect, real, deliberate, consistent disrespect, is not just an insult to your dignity. It is a test of your architecture. A stress test applied directly to the structure of your identity. And whether you know it or not, every single time someone disrespects you and you respond, or fail to respond, you are revealing something. About who you are. About what you believe you deserve. About how solidly you are actually built. The Stoics knew this. Marcus Aurelius knew it from his throne, where every advisor, every rival, every senator with political ambitions tested the limits of what the emperor would tolerate. Epictetus knew it from the floor, literally the floor, as a slave, where disrespect was not an occasional inconvenience but the permanent weather of his existence. And both of them, the emperor and the slave, arrived at the same conclusion through the same rigorous philosophical practice. The person who can remain unshakable in the face of disrespect does not just survive it. They are forged by it. Today, 12 rules. Each one a layer of armor. Each one a discipline that, practiced consistently, builds the kind of person that disrespect simply cannot penetrate. Let's build. Rule 1. Understand what disrespect actually reveals. Before you respond to disrespect, before you decide what to do with it, you need to understand what it actually is. Because most people make a fundamental error the moment disrespect arrives. They make it about themselves. They internalize it. They hold it up against their own reflection and ask, is this true? Am I what they are suggesting I am? This is the wrong question. Entirely. Disrespect is not a mirror that reflects you. It is a window that reveals the person offering it. Think about it carefully. A person who is genuinely secure, genuinely fulfilled, genuinely at peace with themselves and their place in the world, does not need to diminish others. They have no use for it. Disrespect costs them something they cannot afford to spend, the energy and attention required to construct and deliver it. The only people who consistently disrespect others are people who are, in some fundamental way, at war with themselves. People whose internal landscape is so turbulent, so insecure, so quietly desperate, that pulling others down is the closest they can get to feeling elevated. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly." He didn't write this to generate contempt for people. He wrote it to generate understanding. To remind himself, before the day began, that difficult, disrespectful behavior is a symptom of something happening inside the person displaying it. Not a verdict on the person receiving it. The moment you genuinely understand this, not as a concept but as a lived conviction, disrespect loses most of its power over you. Because you stop receiving it as information about your worth and start recognizing it for what it actually is. Someone else's pain, wearing an aggressive costume. You don't have to absorb someone else's pain. You don't have to take it personally. You don't have to carry it. Let it belong to who it belongs to. Rule 2, never negotiate your dignity. There is a particular kind of person who responds to disrespect by working harder to earn respect from the person who disrespected them. They explain more. They achieve more. They present more evidence of their worth. They try, with increasing desperation dressed up as confidence, to make the disrespectful person see them differently. This is one of the most painful traps a human being can fall into. And I want to explain precisely why it fails every single time. When you attempt to earn respect from someone who has demonstrated a willingness to disrespect you, you are operating from a fundamental misunderstanding. You are treating their opinion as a court, and yourself as the defendant who must prove innocence. You are not a defendant. Your dignity is not on trial. A man named Lawrence spent 3 years trying to prove himself to a manager who had, from the first week of his employment, treated him as invisible. Lawrence worked weekends. He delivered results that exceeded every benchmark. He stayed late, spoke carefully, presented brilliantly. The manager remained unimpressed. Or rather, he remained unchanged. Because his disrespect was never about Lawrence's performance. It was about something happening in the manager himself that Lawrence's excellence could never resolve. One day, Lawrence stopped trying to earn what he realized could never be given by this particular source. He stopped performing for an audience of one who had already decided the show wasn't worth watching. And something unexpected happened. Lawrence's work became extraordinary, not because he was trying to prove something, but because he was finally doing it for himself. And the people around him noticed what the manager had been too preoccupied with his own limitations to see. Epictetus said, "Never depend on the admiration of others. Your dignity is not something you earn from people who refuse to see it. Your dignity is something you inhabit, fully, quietly, without needing a single external confirmation. Refuse to negotiate it. Refuse to audition for it. Refuse to perform for people who have demonstrated they are not qualified to judge the performance." Rule 3, Master the power of silence. Most people believe that responding to disrespect, quickly, sharply, visibly, is a demonstration of strength. It is not. In most cases, it is a demonstration of exactly what the disrespectful person was looking for, proof that they got inside you. The reaction is the reward. Every time you respond with matching heat, with defensiveness, with visible hurt, with the desperate need to have the last word, you are confirming that the reach was successful. That they found the frequency. That the button they pressed is still active and accessible. Silence does something entirely different. Silence says, without a single word, you did not reach me. Not as a performance of indifference. Not as the cold, theatrical silence of someone who is clearly furious underneath. But the genuine, grounded, unruffled silence of someone who assessed the situation and found it unworthy of their energy. There was a woman named Adise who worked in an environment where one colleague, territorial, threatened by her competence, and skilled in the particular art of the public diminishment, made a habit of undermining her in meetings. Small comments. Perfectly timed. Always deniable. Always designed to produce a reaction that would make Adise look reactive and her colleague look reasonable. For months, Adise responded. She defended herself. She clarified. She pushed back. And every time she did, she felt the dynamic solidify, because her responses were feeding something she hadn't yet identified. Then she changed her approach entirely. She stopped responding in the moment. She would hold eye contact for a beat after the comment, calm, unbothered, utterly unmoved, and then continue as if nothing of significance had occurred. Because in her assessment, nothing of significance had. Within 6 weeks, the comments stopped. Not because her colleague had a change of heart. But because the reaction she had been feeding on was no longer available. And without the reaction, without the visible proof that the reach had been successful, the behavior lost its entire purpose. Silence is not passivity. Silence, wielded with intention and groundedness, is one of the most powerful responses available to you. Learn to use it. Rule 4, respond from strength, never from wound. There are moments when silence is not the appropriate response. When something must be said. When a line must be drawn and drawn clearly. When allowing disrespect to pass without acknowledgement would not be dignity, it would be disappearance. In those moments, the quality of your response matters enormously. And the most important thing I can tell you about responding to disrespect is this. There is a world of difference between responding from strength and reacting from wound. Reacting from wound looks like this: the hot flush of emotion, the sharp words you will regret, the escalation that gives them exactly the chaos they were hoping to create, the version of yourself that you will cringe at later when the temperature drops. Responding from strength looks entirely different. It is calm. It is specific. It is delivered without raised voice or visible agitation. It does not attack the person, it addresses the behavior. And it lands with the unmistakable weight of someone who is not operating from hurt or fear but from a clear, settled understanding of what they will and will not accept. Marcus Aurelius practiced this relentlessly. He was provoked, daily, as emperor, by people with political agendas, personal jealousies, and every kind of manipulation available to powerful people. His meditations are full of the internal work he did to ensure that when he responded from his highest self. Not from the part of him that was irritated or insulted or tired. From strength. The way to build this capacity is not complicated, but it requires practice. When disrespect lands, do not respond immediately. Give yourself the time, hours if necessary, days if the situation allows, to let the emotional heat dissipate. And then, from the cooler, clearer place that follows, decide what you actually want to say. You will find, most of the time, that what you want to say from strength is far shorter, far more powerful, and far more devastating to the disrespectful person's position than anything you would have said in the heat of the moment. Strength is quiet. Strength is precise. Strength does not need volume to be heard. Rule 5. Protect your environment. Here is a rule that most people resist, because it requires a decision that feels uncomfortable, and sometimes feels like giving up. It is not giving up. It is one of the most sophisticated forms of self-respect available to you. You are allowed to remove yourself from environments and relationships that consistently disrespect you. Not every situation can be fixed with the right response. Not every person can be reached with the right words. Not every environment, if you stay in it long enough and respond skillfully enough, will eventually become one that treats you with the dignity you deserve. Some environments are simply toxic. Some people are simply committed to their behavior in ways that your presence, your excellence, your patience, and your carefully crafted responses cannot change. And staying in those environments, in the name of toughness or loyalty or the sunk cost of years already invested, is not strength. It is a slow erosion. Think of it this way. A plant placed in the wrong soil does not fail because it is a bad plant. It fails because the conditions are wrong. Move it to the right soil, and the same plant that was withering becomes something extraordinary. You are not required to keep trying to grow in soil that is actively working against you. Seneca wrote, "Associate with those who will make a better man of you." This is not elitism. It is ecology. It is the understanding that who and what you surround yourself with is not background noise, it is the actual conditions of your growth. Audit your environment honestly. Where are you consistently being diminished? Where has your patience and your skillful response been met, time and again, with more of the same? Where are you working harder to be respected than the environment is working to deserve your presence? Those are the places to leave. Not in anger. Not in dramatic declaration. But with the quiet, clear, unashamed decision of someone who has finally understood that their growth is worth more than their tolerance. Rule 6. Build an identity that disrespect cannot shake. Every rule we have covered so far is, ultimately, in service of this one. Because the deepest truth about becoming unshakable in the face of disrespect is not a technique. It is not a response strategy. It is not even a philosophy, though philosophy helps build it. It is identity. The person who is genuinely, constitutionally, from the inside out unshakable, is not unshakable because they have found the perfect response to disrespect. They are unshakable because they have built an identity so solid, so clearly defined, so thoroughly inhabited, that disrespect simply finds nothing to grab onto. There is nothing to destabilize because the foundation is not built on anyone else's opinion. A man named Elias had spent most of his adult life with a sense of self that was, without him realizing it, almost entirely constructed from external feedback. He felt good about himself when people affirmed him. He felt uncertain when they didn't. He felt confident in rooms where he was celebrated and shrunken in rooms where he wasn't. His identity was not a foundation. It was a weather vane, pointing whichever direction the wind of other people's opinions was blowing. Then something happened that he would later describe as the most painful and most important experience of his life. A public failure, visible, commented on, discussed by people who found a certain pleasure in the discussing. The kind of failure that, if your identity is built on external validation, can feel genuinely catastrophic. Elias didn't crumble. Not because he wasn't hurt, but because the experience forced him, for the first time, to go inside and build something that didn't depend on what was happening outside. He started asking himself questions nobody had ever encouraged him to ask. What do I actually value? What do I believe, independent of what I've been told to believe? What kind of person do I want to be, not to impress anyone, not to earn anyone's approval, but because it aligns with the deepest truth of who I am? And from those questions, slowly, imperfectly, over months and then years, he built something. An identity. A real one. One that belonged entirely to him. And the remarkable thing about a real identity, one built from the inside out, from genuine self-knowledge and chosen values and the lived experience of knowing who you are when no one is watching, is that disrespect cannot shake it. Not because it doesn't land. It lands. But it lands on solid ground. And solid ground does not. We left part off with 6 rules and a foundation. A foundation built on understanding what disrespect actually reveals. On refusing to negotiate your dignity. On the sovereign power of silence. On responding from strength rather than wound. On protecting your environment with the same seriousness you protect everything else that matters. And on building an identity so solid that disrespect finds nothing to grip. But a foundation, no matter how strong, is not the building. The building is what we construct on top of it. And the 6 rules we are about to cover are not just protective. They are transformative. They take everything we built in part 1 and turn it into something that doesn't just defend you against disrespect. They turn it into something that makes you genuinely, permanently, constitutionally unshakable. Let's finish what we started. Rule 7, use disrespect as intelligence. Every general worth studying in the history of military strategy understood something that civilians rarely think about. The enemy's behavior is data. Not a personal insult. Not a reason for outrage. Data. Information. A window into the opposing side's fears, weaknesses, priorities, and methods, offered freely, in the very act of opposition. The person who disrespects you is doing the same thing. They are telling you, with every slight, every dismissal, every carefully constructed diminishment, exactly what they are afraid of. Exactly what they feel threatened by. Exactly where their own insecurity lives and what form it takes when it faces someone it perceives as a threat. Because here is the truth that most people are too distracted by their own offense to notice. People do not disrespect what they consider irrelevant. They disrespect what makes them uncomfortable. What reminds them of their own limitations. What represents something they want but cannot access. What sits in front of them as a daily reminder of the gap between who they are and who they wished they were. Your excellence provokes people who have abandoned their own. Your boundaries provoke people who have never established theirs. Your peace provokes people who have never known it. Your growth provokes people who stopped growing and told themselves it was because growth wasn't worth it. A woman named Serena spent 2 years being systematically undermined by a senior colleague in her field. The undermining was consistent, creative, and targeted with a precision that initially baffled her. Why these specific things? Why this particular angle of attack? Then one day, reading through old project files, Serena discovered something. Every single thing her colleague had targeted her on was something her colleague had once attempted and failed at. Every dismissal was a mirror of a personal wound. Every attack was a map of an insecurity so specific and so painful that her colleague had spent years constructing elaborate defenses against being reminded of it. Serena was not being attacked because she was weak. She was being attacked because she was, in precisely the ways that mattered most to her colleague, strong. From that day, Serena stopped experiencing the undermining as a wound. She experienced it as intelligence. As a detailed, involuntary briefing from someone who had accidentally revealed exactly what they were afraid of. She never changed her behavior in response. She didn't need to. She simply kept being exactly what she was, knowing now, with complete clarity, that it was precisely that which had made her a target. Read the disrespect. Learn from it. Let it tell you what you carry that makes certain people uncomfortable. And then carry it more deliberately than ever before. Rule 8, detach your worth from their perception. This rule sounds simple. It is not simple. It is one of the most demanding psychological disciplines a human being can undertake, and it is the one that, when genuinely achieved, changes everything. Your worth is not determined by anyone's perception of it. Not your managers. Not your families. Not the colleague who undermines you or the partner who diminishes you or the stranger online who has appointed themselves the arbiter of your value. Your worth is not a democratic process. It is not subject to a vote. It cannot be increased by universal approval or decreased by a single person's contempt. But here is why this is so difficult, and why so few people actually live it rather than simply agreeing with it intellectually. From the earliest age, human beings are wired for social approval. We are tribal creatures. Acceptance meant survival for our ancestors in ways so literal and so urgent that the need for approval was burned into our nervous systems at the biological level. When someone disapproves of us, when someone disrespects us, the response is not just emotional. It is physiological. The body registers it as a threat. The stress response activates. The entire system mobilizes as if the danger is existential. Because for most of human history, it was. But you are not living in the ancient landscape where tribal rejection meant death. You are living in a world where someone's poor opinion of you is, in almost every case, entirely survivable. And the work of detaching your worth from their perception is the work of teaching your nervous system what your mind already knows: their assessment of you is not a verdict. It is an opinion. And opinions, even delivered with confidence, even repeated often, even coming from people whose approval you once desperately wanted, are not facts. Marcus Aurelius returned to this again and again in his private journals. Not because it was easy for him, it wasn't, even for an emperor who had studied philosophy his entire adult life. But because he understood that the moment he allowed another person's perception to determine his inner state, he had surrendered the only sovereignty that actually mattered. I have often wondered, he wrote, how it is that every man loves himself more than all the rest of men, but yet sets less value on his own opinion of himself than on the opinion of others. Read that slowly. Let it land. You love yourself, and yet you give a stranger's opinion of you more weight than your own knowledge of yourself. This is the work. Reversing that. Building such a clear, honest, grounded knowledge of your own worth, through your values, your actions, your integrity, your daily choices about who you are when no one is watching, that external opinion becomes, not irrelevant, but secondary. Information at best. Noise at worst. Never a verdict. Rule 9, let your excellence be your loudest response. There is a temptation, deeply human, completely understandable, to respond to disrespect with words. With argument. With the careful construction of a case for your own worth, presented to the very person who has demonstrated they are not interested in receiving it. I want to offer you something more powerful than words. Results. A man named Emmanuel was told, directly, by someone in a position of authority over his career, that he was not the kind of person who would ever reach the upper levels of his industry. The words were delivered casually, as if they were simply factual rather than deeply cruel. As if his ceiling had already been measured and found low. Emmanuel had two choices. He could spend his energy arguing. Proving the assessment wrong through conversation. Demanding to be seen differently by the person who had already decided how to see him. Or he could spend his energy building. Doing the work. Developing the skills, the results, the body of achievement that would eventually make the assessment not just wrong, but laughably wrong. He chose to build. He didn't do it to prove a point. That is an important distinction. Doing something to prove a point keeps you emotionally tethered to the person you're trying to prove it to. You are still, in that scenario, living for their reaction. Emmanuel built because building was what he was meant to do. Because the work mattered to him independently of anyone's assessment of his capacity for it. Because he had decided, quietly, firmly, without announcing it to anyone, that his life would be the answer to the question of what he was capable of. Several years later, he was operating exactly where he had been told he would never reach. The person who told him he had a low ceiling never received an explanation. Never received a confrontation. Never received the satisfaction of being made to answer for what they had said. They simply received the evidence. In silence. In the form of a life that had been built in full, elegant, complete contradiction to their assessment. Excellence is not just a personal achievement. In the context of disrespect, excellence is the most devastating response available to you. Because it cannot be argued with. It cannot be dismissed. It does not require the disrespectful person to acknowledge it, and it remains true regardless of whether they do. Go build something extraordinary. And let it speak in the voice that argument never could. Rule 10, forgive without excusing. This is the rule that the most misunderstood, and I want to address that misunderstanding directly. Forgiveness, in the context of disrespect, is not the act of telling someone their behavior was acceptable. It is not reconciliation. It is not the removal of consequences. It is not the reopening of a door you wisely chose to close. Forgiveness is an entirely internal act. It is something you do for yourself, not for them. Here is what unforgiveness actually costs you, and I want you to hear this clearly. Every person you carry resentment toward is a person who is living rent-free in your mind. They are occupying space, emotional space, mental space, the space where your focus and your peace and your creative energy should be living, without paying a single cent for it. Without losing a moment of sleep over it. Without even being aware, in most cases, that you are still in the building, still tending to the wound they inflicted, still giving them the ongoing gift of your interior attention. Resentment does not punish the person who disrespected you. It punishes you. Epictetus said, "He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has." Forgiveness is the act of reclaiming the interior space that resentment has been occupying. It is the decision to stop allowing a past disrespect to be a current resident of your present life. To stop spending today's peace on yesterday's wound. It does not require a conversation with the person who hurt you. It does not require their acknowledgement or their apology. It does not require you to pretend the disrespect didn't happen or didn't matter. It requires only this, the decision that you are worth more than the ongoing cost of carrying it. Forgive. Not for them. For the rooms of your own life that resentment has been occupying without permission. Rule 11, become comfortable with being underestimated. Here is a perspective shift that will feel strange at first, and then, once it settles, will become one of the most liberating things you carry. Being underestimated is an advantage. Not always. Not in every context. But far more often than most people realize, and certainly far more often than the part of us that wants to be immediately and fully seen is willing to admit. When someone underestimates you, when they dismiss you, discount you, overlook you, disrespect your capacity, they have made a strategic error. They have revealed the limits of their own perception. And they have simultaneously lowered their guard against you. History is full of people who were underestimated and used that underestimation as the very fuel of their eventual dominance. Abraham Lincoln was called a country bumpkin by his political rivals. Beethoven was told by one of his early teachers that he was hopeless as a composer. Oprah Winfrey was told by a television producer early in her career that she was unfit for television. None of them corrected the underestimation with argument. They corrected it with time. With work. With the quiet, patient, utterly devastating power of becoming so undeniably what their dismissers said they could never be, that the dismissal became part of the story. Part of what made the achievement remarkable. The next time someone underestimates you, the next time someone's disrespect reveals the smallness of what they think you are capable of, I want you to feel something unexpected. Stillness. Not the stillness of defeat. The stillness of someone who knows exactly what they are building and has no need to defend the blueprint to people who cannot yet read it. Let them underestimate. Let them dismiss. Let them believe, for as long as it serves you, that you are exactly as small as their limited perception suggests. And then build. Quietly. Consistently. Without announcement. Until the day the building is too tall to be ignored. Rule 12, choose unshakability as a daily practice. We arrive at the final rule. And it is the one that makes all the others sustainable. Because here is the truth that every rule in this conversation has been building toward. Becoming unshakable is not a destination you arrive at. It is a practice you return to. Every single day. Some days the practice is easy. You feel grounded. You feel clear. The disrespect that comes your way lands on solid earth and slides off without penetrating. You respond with the calm, precise, strength-based authority of someone who has done the work and knows who they are. And some days, the days when you're tired, when something else in your life is already pulling at your foundation, when the disrespect comes from a direction you didn't see coming or from a person whose opinion matters to you in ways you didn't fully realize, some days the practice is hard. Those days are not failures. Those days are the practice itself. Marcus Aurelius didn't write his meditations because the Stoic philosophy came naturally to him. He wrote them because it didn't. Because he was human, fully, fallibly, vulnerably human, and the commitment to living with wisdom and equanimity and unshakable groundedness required daily renewal. Daily recommitment. The daily decision to return to the practice even when, especially when, the practice was most difficult. He wrote to himself. Reminding himself of what he knew. Calling himself back to who he had chosen to be. You need to do the same. Not necessarily in a journal, though a journal is a powerful tool. But in whatever form works for you. The morning that belongs entirely to you, before the world makes its demands. The practice of examining, honestly, without self-indulgence, how you responded today. Where you were shaken when you could have been grounded. Where you reacted when you could have chosen. Where the wound was reached when you thought it had healed. Not to punish yourself for the gap between where you are and where you are going. But to close the gap. Incrementally. Daily. With the patient, faithful consistency of someone who understands that unshakability is not a personality trait you are born with. It is a structure you build. Brick by brick. Rule by rule. Day by day. Until the day you realize, in the middle of something that would have previously destabilized you completely, that you are still standing. Still clear. Still grounded. Still, in the deepest and most important sense of the word, yourself. That is the day you know the practice has become identity. That is the day disrespect loses its last grip on you. Not because the world has become kinder, it hasn't. Not because people have stopped testing you, they won't. Not because the provocations have ended, they never end. But because you have become something that provocations cannot move. Something solid. Something rooted. Something built from the inside out with materials that no external force can erode. You have become unshakable. And unshakable, quiet, grounded, undramatic, utterly permanent unshakability, is the most powerful thing a human being can be. The portrait, all 12 rules as one. Let me bring all 12 rules together, not as a list, but as a living portrait of the person you are becoming. This person understands that disrespect is never a verdict on their worth, it is a window into someone else's wound. They refuse to negotiate their dignity or perform for people who have already decided not to see them. They wield silence with intention, respond from strength rather than wound, and protect their environment with the seriousness it deserves. They have built an identity that does not depend on external confirmation, solid, self-authored, thoroughly inhabited. They read disrespect as intelligence. They have detached their worth from anyone's perception of it. They let their excellence speak in the voice that argument never could. They have forgiven, not for the sake of the person who hurt them, but for the sake of their own interior freedom. They have made peace with being underestimated, understanding that invisibility, in the right season, is a strategic advantage. And every single day, they choose, again, to return to the practice. To recommit to the structure. To lay another brick in the foundation of a self that disrespect simply cannot reach. That is the portrait. And it is available to you. You started this conversation asking how to defeat disrespect. The answer, it turns out, is not a single move. Not a perfect response. Not a confrontation or a comeback or a carefully crafted act of revenge. This is the Stoic path. And you, grounded, unshakable, disrespect-proof, and more solidly yourself than you were when this conversation began.